The story of Omar Artan was supposed to end on the 6th of June in a corridor at Miami International Airport after 11 hours of questioning and a flight back to Istanbul. Instead, 2 weeks later, it keeps growing. Europe gave him a final, Somalia gave him a hero's welcome, and now Kuwait has given him something else entirely, an invitation issued personally by the president of its football federation to officiate the match that will crown a national champion in the Gulf. This is not a story that is fading. It is a story that keeps finding new chapters in new countries, each one adding another layer to the central question that has followed this World Cup since its opening week. What does it mean when the world's footballing institutions, one after another, step forward to publicly affirm a man that the tournament's host country turned away? Let's start from the beginning, because the full sequence of events here matters, and every new development only makes sense in light of everything that came before it. Omar Abdulkadir Artan was born on the 6th of June 1992 in Mogadishu, Somalia. He began refereeing in local Somali leagues before becoming an official in the Somali First Division. He joined FIFA's list of international referees in 2018. In January 2024, he made history as the first Somali referee ever to officiate at the Africa Cup of Nations, taking charge of a group match between Tunisia and Namibia. He went on to referee high-profile fixtures in the CAF Champions League and in qualifiers for the 2026 World Cup itself. He was the sole representative from sub-Saharan Africa selected to officiate at the 2025 FIFA Under-20 World Cup. In 2025, he was named CAF Men's Referee of the Year, the single best official on the entire African continent. And in April 2026, FIFA selected him as one of the match officials for the World Cup itself, one of just 3 center referees chosen from Africa, and the first Somali in history to receive that honor. His country's footballing landscape had been shaped by decades of instability and conflict. FIFA itself had played a role in Somalia's footballing revival, offering training programs for Somali referees and young players as part of the country's recovery. Artan's selection for the World Cup wasn't just a personal achievement, it was presented by Somali sporting authorities and media alike as proof that the investment in rebuilding the country's football infrastructure was working, a symbol of what was possible. On the 6th of June, he flew from Istanbul to Miami to attend a mandatory FIFA match officials seminar ahead of the tournament. He had secured multiple 3-month U.S. entry visas. He carried a diplomatic passport facilitated by the Somali embassy in Nairobi. Every document, every credential, every piece of paperwork that should have been required was in order. At Miami International Airport, U.S. Customs and Border Protection denied him entry and placed him immediately on a return flight to Istanbul. The official explanation cited was unspecified vetting concerns. Artan later said he had been subjected to 11 hours of immigration questioning before being refused entry. What followed that initial denial added a dimension that hadn't been fully confirmed in the earliest reporting on this story. An unnamed U.S. official subsequently told a major news agency that Artan was being refused admission specifically because of an alleged association with suspected members of terrorist organizations. That is a serious allegation, stated by a government official about a man whose entire documented career consists of refereeing youth tournaments, continental finals, and World Cup qualifiers. No formal charge has been brought, no evidence has been made public. The allegation exists in the form of an anonymous official's comment to a wire service, and nothing more substantial has followed it. U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen defended the administration's decision to deny Artan entry. The defense did not include any additional public evidence beyond what had already been stated. FIFA, for its part, confirmed that Artan would be unable to participate as a match official at the tournament, and noted publicly that decisions regarding entry and visas ultimately rest with the host government, language that has now become familiar across every visa-related controversy this World Cup has produced. Here's where the structural problem becomes important, because it explains why Artan's situation couldn't simply be solved by shifting him to matches in Canada or Mexico, the World Cup's other 2 host nations.
FIFA's Referees Committee, chaired by Pierluigi Collina, had established a single centralized training hub in Miami for the tournament's entire pool of 52 referees and 88 assistant referees. Even though the World Cup itself is jointly hosted across 3 countries, the officiating preparation process was built entirely around physical presence in the United States. Sources close to the situation described it as being impractical for Arton to be based in Mexico or Canada instead, given that the centralized preparation structure required every official to attend sessions in Miami, regardless of which country's matches they would eventually be assigned to. A tournament built on the promise of 3 nations sharing the experience equally had, in its officiating infrastructure, concentrated everything in one.
On the 10th of June, Arton landed back in Mogadishu. He was met not with disappointment, but with a hero's welcome. Authorities and ordinary citizens gathered to receive him, treating his return not as a failure, but as a moment of national pride in everything he had already accomplished to get that far. Then, on the 11th of June, the same day the World Cup itself kicked off in Mexico City, UEFA made its move. Following discussions with the Confederation of African Football, UEFA announced that Arton would officiate the 2026 UEFA Super Cup, the match between Champions League winners Paris Saint-Germain and Europa League winners Aston Villa, scheduled for the 12th of August at Red Bull Arena in Salzburg, Austria. UEFA President Alexander Seferin's statement was unambiguous in its message. He called Arton an excellent young but already experienced referee who had proven himself at the highest competition level of African football. He said football is made to connect people and that UEFA wanted to show its respect to Arton and his outstanding officiating skills. Skills, he pointedly noted, that had earned Arton such a prestigious nomination in the first place. CAF President Patrice Motsepe added his own statement, describing Arton as having made Somalia and the entire African continent extremely proud, and personally thanking his friend Seferin by name for enabling the appointment. He called it a great honor for Arton and for African referees, and an excellent example of football bringing together and uniting people from Africa and Europe and around the world. That appointment alone would have been a remarkable enough coda to this story. But it wasn't the end. It was, it turns out, only the beginning of a wider pattern across the global football community. Now, more than a week later, Kuwait has joined that pattern. The Kuwait Football Federation announced through its official channels that it had designated Omar Artan to referee the match between Al-Qadsiya and Kuwait SC on the 29th of June, a fixture in Kuwait's top domestic division, the First Division, and one carrying genuine significance. This is the match that will crown Kuwait SC as league champions for the season. The designation followed a personal, official invitation from the president of the Kuwait Football Federation, Sheikh Ahmed Al-Yusuf Al-Sabah. The Somali Football Federation gave its approval quickly once the invitation was made. In its own statement, the Somali Federation thanked Kuwait for the initiative, describing it as a gesture that reinforces the bonds of friendship and trust between the 2 countries. Think about what that means in practical terms. This is not simply a sympathetic statement from a political figure or a social media post of solidarity. It is a formal, institutional, government-level football federation in the Gulf reaching out directly to its counterpart in East Africa, requesting that a specific official, a man the United States denied entry to under allegations of terrorist association, be sent to officiate one of the most significant domestic matches on its calendar. A league championship being decided in part under the whistle of the very referee a major Western power deemed too risky to allow across its border.
The diplomatic symbolism here is not subtle, and it doesn't need to be explained through inference. Kuwait's federation chose this moment, this match, and this referee deliberately. A champion will be crowned in Kuwait, and Omar Artan will be the man making the calls. That is now scheduled to happen 9 days from now. So, in the space of roughly 2 weeks, Artan's story has moved through an extraordinary sequence of institutions. The United States denied him entry and offered no public evidence beyond an anonymous allegation. FIFA confirmed his removal from the tournament and deferred entirely to the host government's decision. Somalia welcomed him home as a hero. UEFA, working with CAF, gave UEFA one of European club football's most prestigious annual fixtures. And now Kuwait, through a direct invitation from its federation president, has given him a domestic league championship decider in the Gulf. Here's the interesting part, and it's worth sitting with directly. Every single one of these institutional responses, UEFA's appointment, CAF's public thanks, Somalia's welcome, and now Kuwait's invitation, has functioned as an implicit answer to the question that the United States decision raised, but never actually substantiated with public evidence. Is this a man whose presence poses a genuine security concern? Or is he simply one of the most accomplished young referees in world football, whose only crime was holding a Somali passport at a moment when broader immigration restrictions were being applied without individualized scrutiny? The institutions that know him best, the ones who have watched him officiate continental finals, manage the pressure of an under-20 World Cup, and earn the title of best referee on an entire continent, have all answered that question the same way, repeatedly, through action rather than statement. They have given him bigger stages, not smaller ones. This matters for football more broadly because of what it says about how the sport's global institutions are beginning to respond when a host nation's domestic immigration policy collides with the sport's own selection processes. FIFA's position throughout has been one of formal neutrality, confirming that visa and entry decisions rest entirely with host governments, and declining to intervene beyond that. That is, in narrow legal terms, an accurate description of the limits of FIFA's authority. But UEFA and CAF have demonstrated that neutrality is not the only available institutional response. Cooperation between continental confederations, built through a memorandum of understanding signed to encourage cooperation in areas including refereeing, gave UEFA the framework to act where FIFA chose not to. Kuwait's federation needed no such framework at all, simply a phone call, an invitation, and an approval. What remains uncertain is whether this pattern continues to grow, or whether the Kuwait fixture on the 29th of June becomes the natural conclusion of this particular chapter. Arton's career, regardless of what happens at the World Cup itself, now includes a continental final in Africa, a UEFA Super Cup final in Austria, and a league championship decider in the Gulf. 3 different confederations, 3 different parts of the world, all choosing to put him on the pitch for matches of real consequence within the same calendar year that one country chose to keep him out entirely. What do you think this pattern tells us about how international football is beginning to respond to immigration-driven exclusions at major tournaments? Does the willingness of UEFA, CAF, and now Kuwait's federation to step in collectively send a meaningful message? Or does it simply paper over a structural problem that FIFA itself has shown no real appetite to address directly?